What's going on, everybody? Adam from South Harmon Fantasy Football here to bring to you again another really exciting episode. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive. We're going to be looking at running backs going really late in Dynasty startups, and this as a whole theme is really why I'm looking to draft a lot of my running backs a lot later in Dynasty startups. Even though the position right now is as devalued as we've ever seen it, right now I still want to wait and draft the running backs for the most part on my team. I really don't want to be drafting the running back position before round 8 when I'm taking a look at Dynasty startups. But today what I want to talk about are deep dives, guys that are going outside of the top 40 in startups right now at the running back position that I think really should not be going quite this far down the board, and I think because of that are tremendous values. So let's get right into that. But before we do that, you already know we got to hit that intro. All right, so the first person on this list, running back 40 on Keep Trade Cut as it stands today, and as well in Dynasty Startups according to ADP, is coming off the board at the 43rd running back. This is a guy that last season, actually for the entire year, finished as running back 16. Currently going into this year, we don't really know what's going to happen with the guy coming back in this running back room, and this is for my Cleveland Browns. Nick Chubb is coming off of this extremely gruesome knee injury that took place versus the Steelers last year. If you remember, he was on the ground screaming and writhing in pain, and most recently, we really have with Nick Chubb saying for the first time to the media anything that he was really lucky to have the support of his teammates to go through this, really an emotional time for him as an athlete, going and dealing with this type of an injury, which is so hard to come back from because it took place on contact and it was a multi-ligament knee injury. So we don't really know what to make of Nick Chubb. I do think that he is so talented that it wouldn't surprise me if somehow he was able to come back from this knee injury and still be such a dynamic running back that we saw in the past. But if I'm looking at the range of outcomes, I think there's probably a smaller chance that he returns to the old form of Nick Chubb. And for this season in particular, we could be looking at a delay as far as Nick Chubb actually taking the field for the Cleveland Browns. And when I look at what they've done at the running back room in general, they did bring in Deontay Foreman, but I do think with what we saw out of Jerome Ford last season, that I do think that Jerome Ford will be given the 1A role for this Cleveland Browns offense moving into the start of this year. And when you think about what he did last year when Nick Chubb missed time, this is a guy that finished inside the top 10 on multiple occasions and definitely has the long speed to have some of these very big pop runs. You take a look at this guy that I think right now, realistically, you could easily be sliding into your running back 2 slot on a weekly basis, at least for the short term for the season. And who really knows how it's going to shake out? That could be something that he becomes a staple in your lineup at the running back 2 or flex spot easily in a lot of these leagues in Dynasty. And the fact that I'm able to draft him as the 43rd running back off of the board, this is a guy that I just think is a tremendous value. And if you are someone that likes to fade the running back position, this would be a guy that I would be looking to draft in as many startups as possible at this current cost. Now, the second person on this list, Marshawn Lloyd, was drafted in the 3rd round, pick 88 overall by the Green Bay Packers. And when I take a look at what this offense really has and what they did last year, when Jordan Love really had command of this offense, this is a team that I want to have a lot of exposure to. At this time, it's kind of hard to pinpoint at the wide receiver position which of the wide receivers for the Green Bay Packers are the guys that you want to have at current cost and what wide receivers realistically are going to fall off and are not really going to be meaningful on a consistent basis in this offense. When I take a look at the running back room, it's kind of like right now, currently, Marshawn Lloyd anyway is being valued in Dynasty like he's not going to have a meaningful role. And that's really why I definitely like drafting Marshawn Lloyd, who's currently going outside of the top 40 running backs in Dynasty startups. And you take a look at Keep Trade Cut currently, because he's a rookie, a young running back, a lot of these younger players right now on Keep Trade Cut are a little higher in the poll when people do Keep Trade Cut. Currently in the summer, when people are not scoring points, they tend to err more on the side of youth. So that's why I think he's right now currently running back 34 in Dynasty value as far as Keep Trade Cut standards. But when I take a look at him in this offense, Josh Jacobs coming into this year signed what appeared to be a very big contract for the Green Bay Packers, a 4-year type of a contract. But when you take a look and break it down, the Green Bay Packers actually can get out of this contract after only 1 season. And when I think about that, I don't necessarily think that they signed Josh Jacobs with the intention of using him for just 1 season and moving on. They definitely have themselves protected as far as long-term investment for Josh Jacobs. If Josh Jacobs doesn't return to form and start playing more like he did in that 2022 season, he had a huge outburst for Vegas in that season. And definitely you could see that Josh Jacobs, if he was able to do that and perform like that, he could take this running back 1 role and really run with it for the Packers. And while Josh Jacobs on this offense, which does have a good offensive line and is probably going to be one of the more higher powered offenses in the NFL, and he could actually be more like a bell cow in this offense. But when I think about what currently Marshawn Lloyd is being valued as, where he's being drafted, and the fact that if he starts to become a pest to Josh Jacobs early enough in the year, and they start to give him more workload as the season goes on, this could be a guy that at this type of a price, You then at that point could have a young rookie who's starting to eat into the workload of Josh Jacobs, and in his own right is a very dynamic rusher coming out of USC. I think this guy possesses a lot of the high upside traits to end up being a running back that you would like to have on your fantasy rosters. And the fact that he's not being valued inside the top 40, I'm more than willing to take my shot on Marshawn Lloyd, who I think right now is being treated as a speculative running back. And realistically, that's the way you're able to draft him. He is a speculative running back purchase. But if something was to happen and an injury was to occur to Josh Jacobs, this is the guy that could absolutely have league-winning upside. And just like we saw last year where Zamir White took over for Josh Jacobs late in the year, if Marshawn Lloyd was to somehow take over this backfield because of an injury to Josh Jacobs, and this is an offense that I want to have as many pieces as possible, especially when I'm looking at this far down the board, round 13 in Dynasty startups, Marshawn Lloyd is somebody that I'm absolutely willing to stash and try to wait and see what he could be in this Green Bay Packers offense. Now, the third and final person on this list, different than the first two running backs. Jerome Ford, the first running back we talked about, is realistically younger as far as the running back landscape goes, and has also shown us something last season as a very meaningful year. Then you have Marshawn Lloyd, who's very much the upside play and kind of waiting to see what happens in this backfield for the Green Bay Packers. Because he's so young, you're just basically stashing him and waiting to see if the opportunity arises for Marshawn Lloyd. Very different than that is Raheem Mostert here. One thing Keep Trade Cut and Dynasty Startups agree on, running back 42 off of the board. When I take a look at Raheem Mostert coming off the board in the 13th round in Dynasty Startups, going this far down the board doesn't make sense to me, because at this point, when you look at the running backs that are going in the range of Raheem Mostert, currently the running backs going after Raheem Mostert coming off of the board, Gus Edwards, Zeke Elliott, Kamani Vidal, J.K. Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving, Keaton Mitchell, Tyler Algier, Ray Davis, Braylon Allen. Realistically, the point that I'm making here when I'm talking about all these names, every single one of those players you're drafting after Raheem Mostert, if you're betting on them to be anything more than 1 or 2 years of production, you're looking at it wrong. Realistically, none of those players you can project anything as far as being meaningful in your rosters, even if they were to be in the NFL and having technically a career after 1 or 2 years. That's the way I'm looking at Raheem Mostert. I'm looking at Raheem Mostert as a player that could realistically give me huge upside like he did last season in this Miami offense. Sure, they did draft Jalen Wright. That's going to be a part of their running back carousel. But realistically, Jalen Wright might be a player that is not really getting meaningful snaps unless an injury occurs to Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, like they both were at times last year, missing some time. As I take a look at this offense for Miami, I at worst project them to be splitting the backfield with Devon Achane early in this offense. And this is a guy last year that ran for a league high 21 touchdowns, 18 on the ground and 3 through the air. 21 touchdowns. Only Christian McCaffrey offered you 21 touchdowns. I'm able to draft him this far down the board or trade for him at such a discount. It really doesn't make sense for me. And if he was actually to get hurt and basically mean nothing for my dynasty teams at this point moving on, I'm okay with that at this type of an investment. And any one of the players that you're drafting in the range or after Raheem Mostert certainly also, realistically, whether they're hurt or not, may give you just as much or little as Raheem Mostert if he was to get hurt and not do anything for your team this year. I'm not looking for those players to be giving my team more than 1 or 2 years of production, and I'm certainly not looking at their situation much beyond that and thinking that there's tremendous amount of upside. Even a guy like Marshawn Lloyd, realistically, I'm not projecting that it's going to be 3 years or 4 years from now that he's a bell cow. I'm looking at this guy and the situation for him. I think there's a tremendous amount of value if something was to happen to Jacobs or he became a little more pesky than we believe, and he ended up being the 1B to Josh Jacobs' 1A, and that's a player that I already, given that role in the Packers offense, will be willing to slide into my lineup. So for me, even though Marshawn Lloyd's really young, it's not that I'm valuing him as a running back in 5 or 6 years in my roster that I care about. That's not the way that I'm viewing the position. And for Raheem Mostert to be going this late, and the fact that I'm getting him outside of the top 40 running backs, what is the harm? Even if he wasn't to give you any meaningful snaps for the rest of his career and that was a wasted pick, realistically, there's not that many options at the running back position this far down the board that give you much more certainty than he does. So I'm absolutely taking him at this spot. And this is a guy last year in Raheem Mostert that gave you 4 spike weeks. There was only 3 running backs ahead of Raheem Mostert as far as spike week goes. That's a top 5 finish on that week for the running back position. Those players were Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, Breece Hall, and Jahmyr Gibbs. And then not only does he have that home run ability every single week to give me just as much upside as only a handful of players at the running back position, he also was extremely consistent. One of the top 12 running backs in the consistency chart as well. So the fact that I'm able to still get home run league winning ability this far down my draft. And then also, if I just continue to play him every single week that he's healthy, he offers a pretty safe floor from what we saw last year. This is a guy that's very comfortable in this system, knows what he's being asked to do, and does it very well. So for going into this season, for me to be projecting that he doesn't at least have the same type of workload that he did in the back half of the season, which was a very sizable workload in this Miami offense that's dangerous and potent. Really, when you think about all of those things combined, Raheem Mostert is an extreme value being drafted outside the top 40 running backs, and one that I'm absolutely willing to buy at this price. That's really all I got. I wanted to go over these 3 running backs in particular. There certainly are some other running backs that I do think are values at the current moment, but these 3 in particular I felt like really needed to be discussed because of each one of their different situations. Going down the board this far outside the top 40 running backs, these are all running backs that I would love to draft into my running back room as my running back 3, 4, 5, and just continue to build out my running back room with values like these 3. Let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments. Let me know what you think of these 3 players, and if there's some other guys that you think I really should have mentioned that are warranted, let me know all that down in the comments. I'll see you back here, same time, same place, talking more Dynasty strategy. I'm out of here. Peace.